Hello, and welcome to The Curators, a podcast about game projects on Kickstarter. I'm Joey.
And I'm Marcelo. You can find all the games from this episode as well as plenty of others at our curated page at kickstarter.com/gamerati.
You can also find links to each of these projects in the show notes of this episode at thecurators.gamerati.com. If you're a backer of any of these projects, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at thecurators@gamerati.com. Tell us why you're backing a certain project, and we may feature your email on the podcast.
Right, so who goes first today, Joey?
We're going to go me, then you, then me, because our first two games actually fund on the same amount of time. 14 days to go. Mine is going to be Bites, a 20-minute interactive board game.
An interactive board game?
Yeah. What's kind of funny, so this particular creator has created a handful of games, and I like them. I think they're interesting. They have interesting things to say. I'm scrolling down on the page here. They created On Tour, which I believe we talked about on the Curators before. I want to say it's a roll and write. And then they also did a game called QE, which is about bidding, kind of, but with no limits. So you can bid as much as you want to get a thing, and if you get the thing, that's great. And then at the very end of the game, if you spent the most money or the most bidding overall, then you actually lose. So you can't, there's kind of a cap depending on what everybody else is doing, kind of how the meta develops. They're interesting games. I find it a little bit funny because he starts by saying, like, Bites doesn't fit neatly into the categories of board games that we often talk about, like worker placement, deck builder, roll and write. And here's some phrases that describe the game. But taking a look at it, it's pretty obviously an abstract game with variable victory point conditions. And the way that you actually play is super simple. They even mention that it's based on an abstract game called Big Points. It's an 11-year-old game. This isn't just a reprint of it necessarily. There's a lot of new elements into Bites, but if you've ever heard of Big Points as an abstract game, it's kind of the same thing. Although that one is purely abstract, and this clearly has a very fun and cute theme of ants at a picnic. So what you're doing is you're moving any one of the ants along a randomly determined trail of treats, essentially, up to the anthill. So you've got cheese and green peppers, there's bread, there's grapes, there's apples, and they're all corresponding with the colors of the ants. When the ant moves, you choose whichever ant you want, it'll move to its color items. So the yellow ant moves to the cheese, the purple moves to the grapes, and so on. When you land on that specific food piece, the player picks up one of the food pieces that is either prior to or before that ant. In this example, there's a green ant standing on a green pepper, and before them is a apple, and behind them is a piece of cheese. And the player will pick one of those two. So then when the game is over, i.e. the ants make it to the anthill, they've just fully progressed to the anthill, the first ant that makes it to the anthill, his color food is worth 4 points each. So if that green ant makes it to the anthill first, then if you're constantly moving the green ant, you're actually not picking up green peppers most of the time. Every once in a while you'll get a string of multiples that are put together, so you might get, there may even be a moment where a grape is right next to another grape, and so you can move the purple ant to get one of those grapes. But for the most part, that's not going to happen necessarily, and you can even position the board specifically so that it doesn't, if you really want to. If you advance a specific ant to the anthill to get the final big points for it, you may not actually have the requisite pieces that mean you're going to win with that ant being worth 4 points. There's a lot of strategy in this. It also borrows movement rules from Takedo. If you've ever played Takedo, where you're kind of moving the last place guy up forward. In this case, you're moving whichever ant you want. It doesn't matter if they're the last on the line or the first one on the line. You can move whichever one you want, but you're still moving them along the line, and you're hopping each other, and you're mostly just trying to pick up these different pieces to get victory points at the end. It plays in less than 20 minutes. It plays very, very simply. There's extra stuff in this game that do break it apart from a regular abstract game. There's a handful of start cards. There's a handful of new rules for each game to be slightly different. Some of them are very simple. Some of them mean to say the first ant to the anthill is actually worth 0 points instead of 4, and you climb the anthill. So the ant that was there last is worth 4 points as opposed to the other way around. Some of them will get you extra abilities if you land on pieces of chocolate, which are something that any ant can land on, and instead of getting points, you actually get cards. And I'm not sure if you land on the chocolate or if you land next to it and pick it up and get the card. I think you land next to it and pick it up and get a card. And it's not worth points at the end of the game, but it is a way to get extra points in a different scenario. So it might say that, you know, you picked up the chocolate early on, and it tells you that your apples are worth an extra point on top of what they're worth for everyone else. So if everyone else is looking at apples being worth 0, you might actually have some value in your apples at the end of the game if you picked up that specific card. Furthermore, there's also wine tokens, which don't really go into a whole lot of detail. They score differently depending on the rules of the game. They don't give you like a power. They're actually worth victory points depending on how they're scored. They don't really go into them. You'd have to click on like a graphic that they have on the page to actually get a full readout of every single card and what they do, how they change the game, which you can totally do. And they even have a lot of downloads for you in this game so that you can essentially take a look at it before you buy it. The other element of this game is actually the production quality. I highly recommend you go and take a look at it because they not only have this really cool 3D anthill that is just fun to have out there as a way of stacking your ants so that you understand the value of the points very easily. It adds a lot to table presence, so it'll make people want to come and take a look at the game. And the tokens, the actual tokens of the apples, the cheese, the grapes, green peppers, and bread are actually double layered, and they look like they have bites taken out of them, and they're really, really cute. I can't really describe it further beyond that. You have to go and take a look at the actual page, but I think this entire thing looks like a lot of fun. It's very inexpensive. It's only $24 for the base game. It's something kids could play very easily, and I just think it's a really great project.
So any player can move any ant.
Correct.
It depends on his strategy.
Well, you're mostly just looking to get specific resources. So if you want to bank really hard on getting yellow, you're going to move the specific ant that helps you pick up the cheese. And it's almost never going to be the yellow ant. So there's going to be a moment where you're going to need to move that yellow ant to get some value out of the cheese. Otherwise, if they're the last ones to the anthill, that cheese is all worthless. So
Got it.
Lots of choices to make. Lots of different interesting ways to sort of hedge your bets, essentially. You can, in some ways, really help your opponent by accident by advancing an ant way too far on the mat, because now they've gotten a bunch of red and you've advanced the red so that you could get that slice of bread. Now the ant is ready to just go be worth 4 points at the end of the game. You never know. I mean, you do know it's an abstract game, so you have a lot of perfect knowledge in this game, but those mistakes are possible. And I think this is a really interesting game, and I think everyone should take a look at it.
So my game also has a 3D aspect to it. It's Kodama 3D by Indie Boards and Cards. I think that's the second, maybe third version of Kodama. Kodama is a game from, 4 or 5 years ago?
That's pretty recent. Yeah, something like that.
It's called Kodama, the Tree Spirits. Basically, each player has one of these cartoonish Japanese creatures. Each one has a tree. Their mission is to preserve and grow their trees so they can grow healthy and also as an environment for other critters. And in the game, it's easy and hard to explain. Basically, you just climb up the tree through the branches, collecting branches, growing the tree, and you have cards with tasks, like collections, so you get more points at the end of the game. It's a very playful, I would say almost childish game, but it's very fun. And after playing for a while, you realize there is a deeper strategy on the game, especially with more people. The game gets even more playful. I don't know if that's the word I should use here, but it also adds an element of equilibrium in the game. You cannot put too many trees or make your Kodama's scale too much on one side of the tree, or it will fall. The tree can't fall. It's an added element. It's pretty much the regular Kodama game, but with this 3D It's an embellishment of the original game. So it comes with the same cards, but with new tokens. They are thicker, sturdier. You can get a promo pack, depending on how many stretch goals they get. For $15 more, you get a neoprene playmat, and that I found interesting. If you have only the base game of Kodama, you bought it on a store, so you don't have any of the extra, the add-ons, the other Kickstarters, Indie Boards and Cards made. So you can get for $12 extra everything they did as an add-on. So it's a 33 card pack containing all previous Kodama Kickstarter promo cards. Also, there is exclusive promo cards for this game, just to drive home the fact that this game has a more, I wouldn't say kid-directed, but kid-friendly aspect. The first how to play that they have on the page is presented by a kid. So I would gladly trade my regular Kodama for this one, if it weren't for the shipping. But I bet this game is going to go to retail, just as the original Kodama and the other one, Kodama Duo. It was a game for 2 people. It's a lighter game with a smaller box. I have the regular game for up to 4 people, which I think it's funnier. I think it's more enjoyable, Kodama with more people, with more tiny little critters scaling the tree. And in this game, you can really scale the tree. So it's only $24 for you to get one copy of Kodama 3D, including all stretch goals. Shipping will be charged in the Pledge Manager, so not right now, which is always a plus. They are expecting to ship in November, so this game is ready. And for $39, you can get Kodama 3D plus all stretch goals, plus a copy of either the original Kodama the Tree Spirits or Kodama Duo. I knew there was another one. And Kokoro of Avenue of the Kodamas. I don't know that game, but I knew there was another one. They are 14 days to go as of the recording of this episode. They needed only $10,000. They are almost at $15,000 with almost 500 backers. It's a very cheap game to get $15,000 with 484 backers. So yeah, it's a cheaper game than what we usually talk about here. On the Curators.
Which is funny because this is a tall order. Actually doing 3D and actually doing a lot of cardboard punch outs. There's so much more design going into it. I'm actually surprised it's as inexpensive as it is.
And yeah, why is it so cheap? Maybe they already had a bunch of cards printed there, just lying around. They just needed to make the punch outs, the 3D tree.
Well, I mean, indie board and card is not new to the scene by any means. I'm sure they're sourcing some really, really, really good production. Honestly, I just assume they found some really good prices for it for $24. Or actually, indie board and cards, they do a lot of these Kickstarters, and I bet that they are essentially just kickstarting the print run and kind of giving it to you at a pretty solid discount. That would be my assumption. Because something like this should still cost like $6 to $8 per copy. Like I feel like it's huge, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding how big this actually is. But for something that big, it's still going to cost. An $8 game should retail at like $30-40. So it's at $24. This is a total steal.
Yeah.
Going back, I actually realized we had looked at all of our videos, the lead videos for the individual pages, and we had to hit refresh. Most of the time, I don't actually watch the videos of these, because I just don't sit there ready to watch a video. Most of the time, they're just kind of not that interesting. I do recommend you go back and look at the Bites one, because it has a real David Attenborough vibe with like the whole nature walk thing of these ants exploring a picnic. It's super cute. I highly recommend looking at it.
Now I think it's your turn again, Joey.
One that I want to bring up for our third game today is called Twisty Little Passages. It's got 21 days to go, and it's essentially a little puzzle book. And I don't know if you've ever done a puzzle book before that has like an actual theme or story to it. I haven't had the opportunity to really sit down and do one, but I know a lot of people who have, and they are a really awesome way to kind of solitaire play through puzzles with a story with some just sort of interesting. It's really hard to explain. I mean, if you're into the idea of just doing puzzles on your own, then you would already be into this type of a game. I think that the theme, it's there to reach a broader audience. The idea of like a fantasy D&D trope, trying to escape a dungeon and you're fighting monsters and all this sort of stuff is kind of cool. So you can actually look at the demo puzzle, which is obviously quite simple. It's got a real simple opening where you've been taken prisoner, and then there's an outside event that allows you to escape, sort of, but the entire area is deserted, so now you have to figure out where to go. And on the video here, I'm showing this, so for those that are just listening, you're going to have to bear with me on this, but it shows you entering certain rooms with locked chambers where you'll then have to figure out, okay, if I go down a different path and pick up a specific key, I need to unlock a specific door, otherwise I will have wasted the keys. So the keys are supposed to be wasted resources. You don't just pick up a key and then unlock every single door. And then you have to figure out, if I open the next lock, not the previous one, I get another key, and then maybe another key, and then I can open this one section that requires 2 keys, and you move into the next section, you go and collect 2 more, and then open 2 more doors to collect 3 more keys, and then open 3 more doors to collect 2 more keys, and just kind of figure out the method in which you need to traverse this dungeon. Like, the whole dungeon is very linear in the way that you would normally have a linear dungeon. So, like, there's one corridor that goes towards the prison cell from the outside, which makes sense in just normal architecture. But you, the adventurer, has to make your own path through it, picking up keys, re-entering rooms to get other elements, backtracking to go to previous rooms that you had to skip so that you don't waste a key on that room. The whole thing is printed on this glossy spiral bound notebook sort of thing where you can use a dry erase marker to plot your course, figure out the answer to the maze essentially and the puzzle, gather as much of the elixirs that you can so that you have the proper amount of life points, I guess you can say, to go and attack the bad guy at the end and finish that particular maze. Now, the first one is obviously extremely simple. It's there to show you kind of how the game functions, how the puzzles function. And so it's less interesting than I would imagine the rest of the book is. I kind of think of it like, even like in a video game puzzler, where most of the puzzles are actually, even until the end of the game, you're still learning how to play the game. How the game itself is one massive tutorial that by the end of the tutorial, you've actually finished the game. Because they're constantly going to be introducing new elements and new ideas as to how the puzzles progress. You can download the other demo puzzles, they call them, 1-1, 1-2, and 1-3, so like the first level. The one that I opened up on the video is Area 1-1, and so you do have your own like little tutorial for keys and locks, and then demo puzzle number 2 kind of shows you how combat is supposed to function. Demo 3 is supposed to figure out how armor works, and so how you can progress your character to gain armor and how it functions. There is a distinct lack of actual rules in the Kickstarter, so I was a little curious as to exactly how combat was supposed to function. I do know that the enemy does do 12 damage, and you have the potential to have 13 hit points, so the concept there is that you basically make it out just barely. It doesn't quite tell you how many times you have to attack it, or if it does damage more than once, or if it only does damage on defeat, or I'm not quite sure how it's supposed to function. I'm sure that the game itself will include the proper rules, I just don't see them in the Kickstarter itself. But as the game progresses on the Kickstarter, they will be adding more and more puzzles to the base, I want to say 25 puzzles that they say the game comes with. So the Kickstarter hasn't fully funded just yet. They need like $1,000 more. It's right on the cusp. It's got 21 days left, so it will fund definitely, and we're going to be expecting a bunch of stretch goals, which means a bunch of extra puzzles. Or even just the very first stretch goal is just one bonus puzzle, and even more things will come down the pipe. There's plenty of good things that have been said about it via the other videos that are on here. And let's go down to the shipping. The estimated shipping cost for the US is only $7 to $8. probably because it's a book. And technically, as a book, it can go via media mail, which means it's going to be very, very inexpensive. Same thing for overseas. It should actually be quite affordable. And I just think this is a great idea. And I really love the name, Twisty Little Passages. I think it's a fun concept and a really interesting campaign. And that's it for another episode of the show. If you have any questions about the games we featured, or if you'd like us to consider a game on the podcast, feel free to email us at thecurators@gamerati.com, and we'll answer you on our podcast.
You can also reach Joey and myself on Twitter and Facebook at Gamerati. The show notes for this episode and all our episodes are at thecurators.gamerati.com. You can also find The Curators on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify.
And don't forget to check our curated page at kickstarter.com/Gamerati. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/Gamerati.
So it's your fault we don't have a theme today, because we should have picked up a second game with a 3D element.
No, this is decidedly 2D, honestly. I was thinking, hopefully we could do a 3D twist. No, this is violently two-dimensional. So, yeah, no, we don't have a theme. Sorry.